Our Hebrew Bible reading this morning is from 1 Samuel chapter 3, verses 1 through 10. Samuel is called by God, but it takes some time, some help to figure that out. This story of prophetic calling shows a more nuanced way of being called. God waits for Samuel's response. Only then does he become a prophet. When the boy Samuel was ministering to the Lord under Eli, the word of the Lord was rare in those days. Visions were not widespread. At that time, Eli, whose eyesight had begun to grow dim so he could not see, was lying down in his room. The lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was lying down in the temple of the Lord, where the ark of God was. And the Lord called, "Samuel, Samuel," and he said, "Here I am," and ran to Eli and said, "Here I am, for you called me." But he said, "I did not call. Lie down again." So he went and lay down. The Lord called again, "Samuel." Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, for you called me." But he said, "I did not call, my son. Lie down again." Now Samuel did not yet know the Lord, and the word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him. The Lord called Samuel again, a third time. When he got up and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, for you called me." Then Eli perceived that the Lord was calling the boy. Therefore Eli said to Samuel, "Go, lie down, and if he calls you, you shall say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'" So Samuel went and lay down in his place. Now the Lord came and stood there, calling as before, "Samuel, Samuel." And Samuel said, "Speak, for your servant is listening."
Our gospel reading this morning comes from John's Gospel. This is chapter 1, verses 43 through 51. This is Jesus calling disciples. It sounds like many of the call stories we hear from disciples, but you will hear that there are, as we mentioned with the children, two very distinct responses. The next day, Jesus decided to go to Galilee. He found Philip and said to him, "Follow me." Now Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, "We have found him about whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus, son of Joseph from Nazareth." Nathanael said to him, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" Philip said to him, "Come and see." When Jesus saw Nathanael coming toward him, he said of him, "Here is truly an Israelite in whom there is no deceit." Nathanael asked him, "Where did you get to know me?" And Jesus answered, "I saw you under the fig tree before Philip called you." Nathanael replied, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." Jesus answered, "Do you believe because I told you that I saw you under the fig tree? You will see greater things than these." And he said to him, "Very truly, I tell you, you will see heaven opened and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man." The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Would you pray with me? Spirit of the living God, you have always been calling us. You are calling us again today. Open our hearts and our very souls to that calling. And may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable to you, O God, our rock and our redeemer. Amen. So Philip is a little hard for me to relate to, if I'm being honest. Jesus asks him to follow, and without question, he does. Perhaps I'm jaded. Who isn't a little bit jaded by the constant barrage of sales pitches, phishing schemes, marketing gimmicks that most of us are subject to? There's something almost refreshing about how open Philip is to Jesus' invitation. Without a question, he just goes. And of course, knowing that this is Jesus Christ who is inviting him, his apparent naivete winds up actually being rather wise in the end. But I can't help but feel like he is a little quick to hop on the bandwagon, like maybe he should have asked for just a little bit more information before he went. I wonder if Jesus was also a little bit surprised, maybe even mildly disappointed in how quickly and unquestioningly Philip responds. I wonder if Jesus had a little bit more of a pitch that he wanted to give to Philip, but Philip surprises him with this quick, enthusiastic response. Now, Nathanael responds very differently when Philip invites him. Nathanael asks this incredibly sharp question. I have to assume he laughed a little bit as he said that. Can anything good come out of Nazareth? He's suspicious. I love that line. I grew up in a small town, and we grew up and played sports against other really small towns. And this is how we would talk about those towns. This is the kind of thing we would say about places like Barnstead, Alton, or worst of all, Lisbon. It still pains me a little bit to even utter their names. Of course, I'm kidding mostly, because I've gotten over most of my petty small town rivalries, but they felt real and honest at the time. It felt like nothing good could come out of some of those places, and I know for a fact that people said the same kind of stuff about us. Can anything good come out of Pittsfield? Jesus also seems to love that line. He didn't maybe hear Nathanael say it, but he seems to know that Nathanael is a straight talker. He seems to find it refreshing, like finally, someone who's not as gullible as Philip, someone who tells the truth. Nathanael names what is in front of him, something unlikely, something incredible or unbelievable, and Jesus tells him that he will see even greater things in his lifetime. If you think something decent coming out of Nazareth is unbelievable, just wait until you see what lies ahead. I admire both Philip's faithful response and Nathanael's more critical, questioning response for very different reasons. I aspire to the kind of faith and trust that Philip responds with, to just intuitively know the right thing and take the invitation. But I also believe that God's calling on our lives is meaningful enough to withstand scrutiny. So I don't see a problem with Nathanael's pausing to ask more questions. I think Jesus was up to the task. But at the end of the day, both callings are far more direct and definitive than any that I personally have experienced. I think Samuel's calling in this case is a bit more relatable. Samuel hears a voice calling him 3 times. We don't know if the voice was audible or if he heard it in a dream. It doesn't really matter. When he tells Eli, his mentor and friend who was familiar with the way that God speaks, Eli is eventually able to recognize God's call to Samuel. He gives Samuel the key that unlocks the calling, telling Samuel to go and lie down and to speak back to God when he hears that voice call him again. That sounds a lot more like a calling to me. Sometimes when people learn that I'm a pastor, they ask me, how did you get into ministry? What got you into ministry? And it always seems like they are hoping for a story that sounds more like Philip, or maybe even Nathanael's story, or like Moses standing before the burning bush. And when I tell them the story, they often seem disappointed, because the story is not so fantastical. And they also seem a little bit relieved by the fact that My story is typically one they can recognize from their own sense of life. It's nothing really out of the ordinary from how most of you came to be in the places you are. Over the years of my life, I felt that this sense that I wanted to be in ministry, that I might be called into ministry. And one day I found myself in a place to respond to that calling and to listen. I went to divinity school and there found that there were others like Eli, mentors, who could see my calling sometimes more clearly than I could. And over time, that helped me understand my own calling in a new way and see it more clearly. When God calls us, I do believe it is more commonly like Samuel's story. It happens in a community. We have blind spots, and surrounding ourselves with trustworthy, wise people can help us see things about ourselves and others more clearly. It happens suddenly, bit by bit, sometimes over years, decades. This stewardship season, we are answering the call. We are calling for all hands on deck. We are asking this community to step up and support the vision for what this community, this church is and what it can become. We've asked you to do that financially, as you do every year, by pledging to support Westminster in 2024. And I'm also asking you to consider seriously what you believe this congregation might be called to do, to be, and to become. Like Samuel, I believe that there have been murmurings of a new calling for Westminster over the last few years. Some of you have done a lot of work, fact-finding, good discernment about to trying to decipher whether or not certain ideas are feasible. You've said with your actions, speak, God, for your people are listening. But I want to challenge you today, and I hope that I won't be speaking out of turn. I want to tell you something that for some of you might be tough to hear, but I believe you need to hear it, and I pray that you will hear the love behind what I'm about to say. I think that sometimes we have also responded cynically to the calls we've heard. I believe there is a lingering question in some of us. Can anything good come out of Westminster? I don't know where, but somewhere along the line, a seed of doubt was planted. An idea has taken root sometimes here that this is not the kind of church that imagines boldly and moves toward a vision. I think there is a sense in some of us that Westminster cannot be called into something like a divine purpose. We are a church with over 140 years of history. That's a long time. We're very proud of that history. The oldest church in Spokane. We say that pretty proudly. One of the reasons, though, that I felt called to this particular community, this church, was that you don't live in that past. You could have told me, you could tell everybody who comes in here about this church's glorious past. You could long for the days when Sunday school was bursting at the seams and the balcony was full. But you don't dwell in that nostalgia that plagues so many other churches. You are committed to being the church we are today. And I love the church that Westminster is today. You should love it too. We talk a lot about mission and outreach as our purpose, and I do believe that the church is in this world to be the hands and feet of Christ. What we do for those beyond our walls is central to who we are as a community, but I actually believe that what we do here on Sunday mornings is just as important. I believe that having a place where we can come and be seen and accepted and loved for exactly who we are, where we can disagree with each other but still share a common humanity. I believe that is some of the most important work there is to be done in this world. I wouldn't do this work if I didn't believe that. I believe this community is worth supporting. If this right here is all we ever did, because it is life-changing stuff that we do here, it doesn't happen most places. But I want to challenge you this stewardship season to imagine what the next great thing to come out of Westminster might be. Not the next good thing, not the next decent or acceptable thing, the next great thing. We have an illustrious history. And while we cannot live in that past, we are sustained by gifts given during that time. And we are a beautiful and vibrant community today. But I believe there might yet be a vision, a calling for Westminster that exceeds all of our expectations. This is the tough thing I need to tell you, and I need you to hear it. I think sometimes, like many churches, we've got a confidence problem. We can always find reasons to doubt a particular vision or calling. That would cost too much. The roof needs to be replaced. We don't know how to do this or that. But here's the thing, God does not call the equipped. God equips the called. What we are called to do as a community, the vision that God has for us, it's not about what we think we are good at or what we can or cannot do. It is about what God can do among us. And I do believe that God still has a vision for Westminster. I believe something great will come out of Westminster. And I believe that the vision is going to be big, bold, scary, hairy, audacious. I think many of us are probably going to gasp when we finally see it, shield our eyes even. I believe that discerning that vision more clearly is going to take a whole lot of Samuels. So I'm asking you, in addition to the money, the time, and the service you give this place, will you also lend your ears and hearts? Will you dare to imagine, to firmly believe even that something great, something incredible, something that some would call unbelievable can come out of Westminster? Will you take the time to listen to the ridiculous, the improbable, the astronomically expensive ideas that might emerge? And will you at least say, okay, God, we are listening? Will you be again, as you always have been, a place of possibilities? Because I believe this is a place of great possibilities. And I believe that the future of this church is not a restoration of the past, nor a piecemeal solution that guarantees its present form into perpetuity. I believe there may yet be a vision for something new and wondrous at Westminster, but we've got to respond and listen. We've got to open our hearts, our eyes, our ears, our minds. We have to seek out the Elis, the ones who can tell us, go, listen to that, ask more about that, and maybe the ones who can tell us, don't waste your time on that. But I believe that something great can and will come out of this community. I believe that God is doing something among us that we are responding to. And I'm asking you to join me in that sincere belief, to imagine beyond what you think might be possible. Do so with boldness, humility, and joy. Amen.
Amen.